Hello there, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of TA with MK. My name is McKay, and if you found your way to this video, we're going to make the assumption that you've watched part 1 and part 2 of my little training tutorial series on setting up your first trade using the coin XRP. Now, if you have not seen those two videos, check the links in the description. I'd recommend pausing this one and watching those first. That way it makes sense, kind of the order of how I go through setting up a chart. Now, the first video, of course, was about the 4 charts that I look at before I even bother trading or looking at a coin that I'm going to chart to trade. The second video was the beginning of charting XRP, finding major areas of support and resistance. And in today's video, we're going to conclude the charting of XRP, how we find the targets that we're looking for, our entry ideas, stop loss, and things of that nature. So if that sounds interesting to you, please remember to like and subscribe, and let's go. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. I just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my subscribers to this point. As we're here on my homepage of my YouTube channel, we can see that I'm at 304 subscribers, which is an awesome deal. For me, that's a gigantic milestone to hit 300 subscribers. So a big thanks to each and every one of you that follow the channel every day. I appreciate you. Big like and thumbs up and everything to you guys. And one last thing as we hop over here to the XRP chart, before we dive into kind of the meat of the content of this video, just want to put out a quick disclaimer that nothing that I ever say in my videos is obviously financial advice. I know that's something that all YouTubers feel like they have to say, but in this video specifically, I just want to point out that this coin that I'm going to be charting, XRP, with the market, FUD that just came out recently with the FTX and the dump and all that, which is not what we're going to talk about in this video, but I just want you to know that I'm not looking to trade XRP right now. I mean, it's always a coin that I keep an eye out for just because it has a strong community and a lot of, an army that follows it. So anytime there's, good setups on the chart for XRP, I am looking to trade it, but right now I'm waiting for the market to kind of find a bottom and form some structure before I'm looking to long any sort of coin. However, we're going to go through and at least show you my exact thought process on how I would go about it if I were to be trading XRP. Now, again, if you guys haven't watched the last 2 videos, I'd recommend pausing this one and checking those links in the description just to make sure that you can catch up with why we're at the point we're at now. But just a quick summary, we have the blue lines on this chart that are horizontal. Those are our weekly lines of support and resistance. We have the orange lines, which are daily lines of support and resistance. We have this green line, which was a fib level that we were eyeing on the chart. And we're just going to kind of pick up where we left off as far as explaining a couple other uses of the fib tool as it relates to looking for longs for a coin or for shorts for a coin. So if we look at price action right now on the 4-hour chart for XRP, we can identify that it most recently bounced back on November 9th here at my orange line of daily support, and that's where it's at right now. So in this case, they always say you should never short support or long resistance. In this case, we're at support, but what we'd be looking for if the market was to have a pullback, which we'd have some ideas that would support that idea, we'd be looking for a loss of this current support level, a bearish retest, and potentially for price action to head down to this weekly level of support, right? And what I'm looking for as far as using the fib retracement tool, just to kind of follow up and aid from the last video, is in this case, if we take this very last swing, and the reason why we call this a complete swing is you have a high, you have a confirmed low, and then you have this confirmed high, which is a lower high, obviously, than this one up here. But the point being is that's a complete swing. A swing high, low, high. Now, you wouldn't want to pull a fib from the current swing because even though we have this high, we don't know where this low is going to stop. We don't know that it's necessarily going to bounce right here and come up here or anything. So we wouldn't really be able to pull a useful fib from the swing that we're on right now. So what we can do is pull the fib tool out, and we're going to pull out the reverse of what we do when we're trying to find areas for bounce ideas. So what I mean by that is if you're looking for areas for bounce ideas, you might come from a swing low and then drag up to, in this case, a swing high, and you'd be looking for bounce ideas at some of these major fib levels. Now, if you're looking for areas to potentially open shorts, you want to pull it from a swing high, which in this case would be up here, down to the swing low, which you can see is right down here at about 31.5 cents. And you're looking for areas that the coin might pump to before getting a rejection. So for example, you can see XRP found a rejection here at around the 382 of that swing high to swing low. So there's 2 things we want to talk about really quick before we kind of move on with this chart. And number one one's going to be alerts are your best friend. Now, I think TradingView gives you something like 300 or 350 alerts you can set if you have kind of their max package, which is what I have. And just to be honest with you, I typically have those completely used up. Now, every once in a while, it'll pop up an alert that tells me my alerts have all been used, and then I usually have to click a deal that just says to basically delete all of my inactive ones. But for the most part, I'm using them constantly. So if you don't have a TradingView account, a paid version of it at least, I would recommend, investing in that at some point as your journey of crypto or trading progresses, just because you're going to find that that's one of the best tools as a trader is your ability to set alerts. And on TradingView, it's just as simple as right-clicking on a line. So let's just say, for example, price action is going to push its way back up here, and I'm looking for an entry idea here at this blue level of weekly resistance or support. In this case, it's above price action, so we call it resistance. I can right click and hit add alert on the horizontal line. I usually just do the only ones. You have a few other options. You have this one that says like once per bar close. So for example, on the 4-hour time frame, if we were setting the alert, it would be waiting for that candle to actually close above that, in this case, for it to trigger the alert. I want to know the second it even touches it or crosses it, so I have crossing set up. I only need the alert one time for me to see it and come out here and decide to potentially execute a trade. And then I go down here and I'm very specific with what I name the alert. In this case, I would put XRP weekly resistance. Now, if it was weekly support, if I was putting an alert at a blue line below, I'd put the word support. Whatever you do, you want to put something here so you quickly can see the alert and understand, okay, this is where price action's at. Before you've even pulled up the chart, you already know. At that point, you can go ahead and click create. You're going to want to go through here on all of these, horizontal lines that you've made that are relevant, at least to around where you're looking to enter your trade, which we'll go over in just a minute, some ideas that you might be looking for. But you want to click and name, all of these different levels that you're watching for. That way you could be busy doing something and you'll get an alert on your phone. You can know, oh, I need to head out and potentially open a trade. At least that's how I trade. I don't typically have buy orders and sell orders just waiting at levels, because often you never know what the market's going to do. FTX can come out with some FUD, things like that, and all of a sudden a trade that you thought was going to be good doesn't turn that way. I always want to be able to come out and reassess before I open trades. That's just how I am. I don't just put buy levels down on these trading ideas. Now, on investing purposes, like with Bitcoin or something, I have a few buy orders pre-set up just because I view these certain levels as very significant for my long-term investment strategy. But long-term investing is a lot different than, in this case, short or mid-term trading. The next important thing that I pay a lot of attention to is the power of higher highs, higher lows, or lower highs and lower lows. And what I mean by that is on this current swing, clearly, even if you go back to kind of the more major swings, we've basically just been putting in high, low, lower high, lower low. This was a confirmed lower high. So at this point, we would be looking for this price action to put in at some point a lower low, unless it breaks back above this last high and is able to flip that as support, in which case then the short-term trend would have changed. And at this point, I'm looking mostly for short ideas on XRP. If you were looking for long ideas, it'd be the reverse of this, where the overall trend might be in that of an uptrend. You might have a low, a high, a higher low, a higher high, and so forth. And so you'd be looking for entry on higher lows. So keep that in mind. Write this somewhere on your whiteboard or whatever you're keeping track of these things at the moment. Try to enter long positions on confirmed higher lows, and you try to enter short positions on confirmed lower highs. Next up, I'm going to be setting 3 very specific alerts on this chart that are relevant to the trade ideas that I'm currently tracking. The first of which is going to be a horizontal line up here at the 382. So I'm going to hit Alt-H on my keyboard. Now, normally once I'm down to the 4-hour time frames and lower, I change back to just normal white. That way, again, I can tell this is just a 4-hour time frame and lower horizontal line that is significant, but not as significant as like the blue, which is weekly, and again, the orange, which is daily support and resistance. Now, the reason that I'm putting this line here is I'm going to put XRP double top. Now, I just put DT because I know what that stands for, but I'm going to put DT for double top or TR, which stands for trend reversal. What I mean by that is if this area gets broken, I'm either looking for price action to potentially just reach the same area of resistance again, which would be what is known as kind of like an M pattern or a double top. Or what I mean by trend reversal, if it breaks that area and puts in a higher high than this, then, depending on what Bitcoin's doing in the overall stock market, I may then be actually looking for short-term long positions, meaning I'd be looking for some sort of an entry on a higher low, because once you've had a low and a high, that would have confirmed this as a higher low, right? This would be the first higher high, and now you have a short-term trend reversal. The major trend would still be intact as far as to the downside, but I would be looking for either getting out of any short positions I was in or potentially looking to actually enter a long position. The next two alerts that I'm going to set are going to be both on these weekly lines. The first one's going to be this one right here, which is obviously just below the 382. This is where I would be eyeing potentially the lower high entry ideas, because you would have, again, this high here. The bounce here would be looking for a lower high entry at this level of weekly, in this case will act as resistance. Or if we break down, I'm going to set an alert on this weekly line, which is currently support, because if we lose that, we're going to end up having ourselves a lower low than this low, which is just meaning that the trend is staying intact. But what I'd be looking for then is an entry back up here in a bearish retest, which would be another lower high, lower than that one, and a good opportunity to short XRP in this case from about 31 cents, potentially all the way back down here to the next major level of support, which would be down around, 24 cents. And again, alerts are your best friend. So there's two other alerts that I'm going to set up, and I'll explain why they're relevant. The first one's going to be this 0.5 for this swing high to swing low. That's just a very, very common retrace area, and it's actually just below this orange line of daily, in this case, resistance, so that's relevant. And then this 0.65 to 618 is what is known as the golden pocket. And if you were to see a retrace out of this coin, or in a retrace, or in this case, a pump out of this coin back up to this area, it would still keep the overall trend intact as far as lower highs and lower lows, right? Because this would just be another lower high than that high there. Also has a lot of confluence as previous support all along in here. So if the market were to have a little bit of an upside move and XRP were to find its way back up at some point to the 43 cent level, I would be looking for great short opportunities from there as well. Or again, at this 0.5 level, which has some confluence back in this area as previously being support. So you kind of have this whole zone in here for XRP that if there was an upside move out of the crypto market as a whole and it drug XRP up with it, you could be looking for some short opportunities between about 41.5 cents on up to about 43 to 44 cents. Now as we hop over to the weekly chart, I want to say one last thing before we kind of move on to our stop losses and entry ideas, and that is that the trend is your friend until the end. So if you notice in this video I'm focused mostly on these short ideas, it's because the overall macro trend clearly on the weekly has been in a downtrend ever since April of 2021 when XRP put at its last major high, right? This last macro high. It's in a downtrend as it's just put in a series of low, lower high. This was actually kind of like a double bottom, but eventually we came down here, so lower low. Now, if you wanted to see any sort of a trend reversal on the weekly to lead to bigger ideas of continued or sustained upside, you'd be looking for a higher high than this last lower high. So if you were to see something like XRP over the rest of this year or into next year pump up to, say 60 cents, which is a major area of resistance in this case, a lot of people would be euphoric and be looking to probably long XRP at that point. But as a disciplined trader, I would just have an alert set there to tell me, hey, now start looking for entry ideas on what should be a higher low to follow, which would just mean the trend is starting to reverse in this direction instead of what it's clearly been doing this whole time in this direction. One last thing before we talk an exact entry idea for the trade on XRP, as well as targets and things of that nature, I also like to look for any current patterns price action may be in that are relevant. And what I mean by relevant is just patterns that typically have a high hit rate, which I believe to be things like ascending and descending triangles. There are other things that I pay attention to. I don't know that the hit rate is really all that good, but head and shoulder patterns, inverse head and shoulder patterns, things that major traders might be looking at. One that I know looks like it's already played out, but it's something I would take note of, is you have this kind of high here, with at least the closures. I know this wick was higher than this one, but the closures were down here. Then you kind of have these higher closes and then these lower closes, all while this support level, the daily support, was holding up. That's what's known as a head and shoulders, because you kind of have 2 shoulders, and a head, right? And the measured move for patterns like that is to actually take the top of the head down to the neckline, they call it, and then you look and you put where it breaks down from the neckline, and that becomes kind of your target. So you can see that that move has potentially played out. Now, does that mean that every time that ever has that pattern that it's going to do that exactly that way? No, not necessarily. But these are things I pay attention to, because if that range breaks down, which it clearly has already, and say price action was only halfway, I might be looking at that as another idea for entry on maybe either a bounce of a long, because clearly had you been tracking this and looking for a long idea at that support level, you could have caught this green candle here for a 21% move, which would have been about a 42 to 43% move with 2x leverage. Could have been a very good bounce. Plus, it was also a bearish retest of this moving averages, which is something else we haven't talked about much in this video. But another thing that I pay a lot of attention to is moving averages on the higher time frames, both as either support if they're below or resistance if they're above. In this case, where XRP had lost the 200 moving average on the daily, it made sense for it to bearishly retest that before further downside. So also, if you pull the fib retracement tool for that last swing, this high down to that low, you could find some confluence that was about the 50%, just below it, but that's also a very common retrace area. In this case, it was a bounce to about 50% of that move before potentially rolling over. So that could have been a good long idea. Now we're just looking for good short ideas, but it's always good to pay attention to what patterns either are on the chart as we currently are constructed, or patterns that may be in the process of playing out. In this case, we found a head and shoulders. It looks like it's already played out. I'm not seeing any other major patterns that I would be trading. Now, say you were looking to long back here between this whole zone. This is kind of like a giant double bottom. You've got price action doing basically a huge W, support, support. As soon as you broke and retested this was a good retest entry for a long idea. These are the things that I pay attention to. Now, quickly before we dive down into the lower time frames, which is going to be the 1 hour, which is where I'm going to look for some other patterns that are potentially forming, look for my entry ideas, my targets, and of course where I would set a stop loss. We're going to first discuss the moving averages, as again, I think this will be the third time in this video that I've said this, but alerts are your best friend, and I truly mean that. And this is going to be the next spot that I set a lot of alerts. Often I'll even write these down on my whiteboard, especially these higher time frames. Just as I'm getting ready to trade a coin, I like to keep track of where major things that I'm going to be using as support or resistance or target, potential target options, where they are on the chart as far as price action goes. What price are these things at? Now, for me, I have a few different moving averages on here. I'm going to explain briefly what they are. So the main ones that I use are the 21, which for me is white. I use the 50s, and I use the 200s. Now, when I say 50s and 200s, it's because there's EMAs and SMAs, and there's a handful of traders that say the EMAs, which is exponential moving averages, are better to use, and some say that the simple moving averages are better to use. You can kind of decide that for yourself. I put more weight on the simple moving averages. Let me explain really quick, in case you're new to the channel or new to trading, what the difference between the two is. And that is that the one that's the simple, which for me in this case, this 51 for example, is the 50 simple moving average. It's just taking the last 50 candles and coming up with an exact average of what that price would be, and that's where it currently sits. Whereas it's counterpart, which is the 50 EMA, or the exponential moving average, it puts more weight on recent price action. So in this case, over the course of the last 50 candles, XRP is in a downtrend, and it's putting more weight on the last candles, and so therefore the pink EMA is below the 50 SMA. The reverse would be true if XRP had been in an uptrend over the past 6 months to a year or so. You would see that the pink or the EMA would be above the SMA. So anyway, that's the difference between the two. And you can see my 200 moving averages are pretty close to each other right now, but the yellow one for me is the 200 simple, and the blue one is the 200 EMA. So what I'm gonna do here on the weekly chart is we're gonna set a couple of alerts. To do that, we're just gonna head up here to the 50, which is the highest one on the chart right now, the 50 simple, the one that I put more weight on. I'm gonna right click on it. Now, you have to set the alerts on these just a little different than price action. I don't know what it is. There's a little glitch, at least that I experience on TradingView, where when I add an alert to these moving averages, if I just leave it on crossing, it just sometimes just triggers randomly. I don't really know why that is. But that being said, one way that work around with that is first you want to make sure you click the moving average that you're setting the alert for in this drop down box. In this case, it's the 50 MA. And then I'm going to change this from crossing to this one that says moving up. Now, if the moving average was below current price, you would click moving down. But I'm going to click moving up. and then I'm going to name it XRP weekly, in this case 50 SMA. I'm going to hit create. Then I'm going to click off of there. I'm going to come down here to the yellow 200 simple moving average. Same thing, right click, make sure this says 200, moving up as price action is below it again, and XRP weekly 50, or no, 200, sorry, 200 SMA. I'm gonna go ahead and click create, and then we're gonna do that one last time for the 21 moving average, which is white here on my chart. Add alert. We're gonna go again, make sure it's on 21, moving up in this case as well, and XRP weekly 21 SMA, and then click create. From that point, I'm going to zoom into the daily time frame, and I'm just going to look for where the moving averages are to determine what ones I want to set an alert on. In this case, the closest one to price action is the 200, sitting at about 40 cents, which is, a fair amount above current price action. So I'm only going to worry about setting an alert on that. Now, if the 50 and the 21 were close to price action or below the 200, I would actually set alerts on all of them, just like I did the weekly. In this case, I'm going to right click on the yellow simple 200 moving average on the daily. Again, make sure it's saying 200 in the drop down box, moving up, and we're going to type on there XRP daily 200 SMA, and then I'm going to click create. From that point, I'm going to zoom in even a little bit further to the 4-hour time frame and do something similar, which moving average is closest to price action. And then on every one of them, I always do the 200 for the most part. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on it first, just because I really like using the 200 moving average on the 4-hour for either entry ideas or targets, which we'll discuss here in a few minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and click add alert there. Again, change it to the one that you're setting the alert for, 200. And we're going to type in 4-hour, or XRP 4-hour 200 SMA. I'm going to click create. And then the one closest to price action in this case, which has been recently resistance, is the 21. So I'm going to right click on that. Looks like I've already set an alert on that. We're going to go ahead and edit it, because I probably did it wrong. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and do that to moving up, and we're going to do the 21. And again, type in XRP 4-hour 21 SMA and click save. Now, one thing I want you to quickly take note of is not all of this will end up being relevant on every single trade, but I keep track of every bit of this on every single trade because it could be relevant. The biggest thing as we get down to the nitty-gritty of kind of finishing up this first trade, so to speak, or setting up a chart for XRP, is going to be finding confluence as it relates to where you're entering, especially where you're taking your targets, and then your stop loss and things of that nature as well. Because at the end of the day, there's so many different ideas out there that lead traders to having numbers they're targeting, whether it's patterns, whether it's moving averages, major areas of support and resistance, and the list goes on. Of course, what we're trying to find as we execute what's hopefully a successful trade is what areas have the most confluence, right? Okay, dokie, my friends, if you're seeing my very large face, then that means your worst fears have come true, and we are wrapping up this video for today. Now, rest assured that the fourth part of this series, which will be the video I'll be putting out tomorrow or the next day, will be the final conclusion to all of this. Up to this point, if you wanted to compare this to like Frodo in Lord of the Rings, we've definitely navigated Middle-earth on our way to Mordor, as we've talked about the DXY and S&P 500 and some of that in the first video. We started setting up our chart in the second video, where we discussed major levels of support and resistance and things of that nature. Today's video, which was the third video, we talked about the moving averages, looking for some patterns, a little bit more on the fib retracement tool. And as we finalize this entire series in our fourth video, which should be another one of about equal length to this, we'll be zooming into the 1-hour time frame and discussing exactly where my entries would be, my targets, and some of that as we kind of wrap up this entire thing, as well as come back full circle to discuss how even when I've zoomed in, I still am always weary of and using the DXY, S&P 500, and of course Bitcoin to determine every part of every trade. So hopefully this has been somewhat helpful along the way to this point, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. As always, on your way out, if you're enjoying my content, please remember to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one. It's TA.